Welcome to ANC. Whether you're in your living room or your kitchen or maybe in your car on your phone, bad, or if you're in the room with us, we are incredibly excited that you've joined us this morning. Just to give you a little insight into me, this week as I've been kind of planning for worship, I've been kind of resonating on this one word, and that word is thankfulness. I feel this, almost more of a, since I got the vaccine, like a weird superpower arising. and I feel incredibly thankful to get to come back to a place like this that is so welcoming and also so valuing of its people and its family, and has been so safe and warm. And so if you want to also have a word to dwell on, at least in these first couple of songs, join me in thankfulness.
See how long you can hold that. Thank you, everyone. Michael, appreciate that. What a band. That was so cool and chill. That's great. Anyway, good morning, Austin New Church. A couple of quick announcements, and we'll move on. First is neighborhood groups. We've got some groups that are starting up right now in the coming weeks. Actually, this weekend, this next weekend, we've got kind of a kickoff deal. So if you're not connected, if you would like to be connected to a group, if you are connected and haven't heard from your group leader, if you would email Tara, the email I believe is on the screen right now as we speak, and she'll get back to you. I'm excited just to have this starting back up. Normal is starting to creep back into our lives, and this just makes sense at this time. So, and then another thing that makes sense is giving. If you are, that was a bad segue probably, but if you are part of Austin New Church, if you've been with us virtually for a while, maybe you've been with us for a long time, a way that you could help us, the way that you could help further this ministry, further our reach, further what we do locally in the community and globally, is by giving. And there's a QR code on the screen. You can point your phone at it and find out different links and different ways that you can give and serve. We would be eternally grateful. It's just one of those ways that you can help Austin New Church do what we do and serve who we serve. And so we thank you in advance for doing that. And we're going to transition now to Sam's going to be teaching today, so that's pretty exciting. So hang with us.
All right, well, good morning to the people in the room. Good morning to those of you joining us online. I'm just glad I have a voice this morning after the Austin FC won their first game ever last night. Yes! I'm glad we have some fans in the house. It felt good and a little wild to cheer in public, just like it feels good and a little wild maybe to have you back in the room with us, and we look forward to welcoming more and more of you back into this space in the months to come. You know, if you've been journeying with us since Easter, you know that we've been looking at these post-resurrection stories between Jesus and his disciples, and we've asked what it means that Jesus demonstrated the path of death and resurrection through his physical body. We've wondered what that means for our bodies now, here. And we've remembered that the face of God is in the precious bodies of the oppressed, so what is done to them is done to him, and therefore our bodies aren't liberated until all bodies are. And today we begin to consider how we actually respond to what Jesus demonstrated for us on Easter, if it is in fact available to us. Today the lectionary brings us to 1 John, and this letter was probably written between 95 and 110 AD, so we can think of this as a commentary on the Gospel of John for a new generation. And if you're doing the math, this means that either John was a child at the time of Jesus' crucifixion, or someone else was writing in his hand. And both are interesting possibilities. But either way, we can imagine the voice of John as the last of the original gang who's still around in his twilight years, writing to all the youngsters out of the wisdom of his experience. Let's read together. We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. How does God's love abide in anyone who has the world's goods and sees a brother or sister in need and yet refuses help? Little children, let us love not in word or speech, but in truth and action. You know, sometimes we have to work extra hard to find the meaning or the wisdom in the text, to wrest it out of its historical particularity and incorporate all that we've learned since it was written. And then sometimes there's a passage like this, right? With truth that just reverberates across the ages. We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. How did the other John 3:16 become the bumper sticker? That's what I want to know. You notice what John doesn't say. We know love by this, that he conquered the grave. No, we know love by this, that he laid down his life, that he modeled the path of descent. I think most of us can nod our heads in agreement with this passage. Faith expressed in action is a great idea. It's one of our core tenets here at ANC. So why do we gather around these stories every week? Why do we come back to this imperative to serve others as a community every Sunday? Because while many of us might agree with these words, it is exceedingly difficult to live by them. And the very moment you leave here or get up from your couch to check your phone, you will be told another story that will play out for you over and over and over throughout your week. And that other story goes like this. You are a person who does not have enough. The not enoughness of your time, the not enoughness of your bank account, the not enoughness of your apartment, house, closet, body, hair, car, job is an urgent thing. And the good news is that you are probably only one more thing away from having enough. Okay, maybe one more thing after that, then maybe one more, but seriously, you're so close. And you've worked really hard to have all the not enough that you do have, so you've got to protect your not enough so that it doesn't become even less, which would put you, well, even farther from enough. Our culture teaches us a scarcity mindset, one in which I believe we intend to be generous once we have enough. But the spirit that lives inside us is that which can take 5 loaves and 2 fish and make a small boy's lunch enough with leftovers. Which story do we believe? And more importantly, which story do we embody? Jason talked last week about how so many people of faith have retreated from our bodies to our minds. I mean, you put 6 of us on a porch and get us going on any one of William Barber's 5 interlocking injustices: systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, or misguided religious nationalism, and we can solve it over a few beers, can't we? One commentator on this passage convicted me with these words this week, and he's writing about the context of 1 John, but again, the words resound for us today. David Bartlett writes, "In a time of schism and dissent, what is most threatening is that Christians should continue pontificating about love while they turn hatefully from one another and ignore each other's needs." Oh, but we're so good at pontificating. If only the world were transformed through our opinions or even our feelings. But as we've been learning, it's our sweaty, shaking, uncomfortable, strong, changing, weary, capable, alert, messy, and magical bodies in which and through which incarnation continues. I love this quote from activist Valerie Kaur. "Love is more than a feeling. Love is a form of sweet labor, fierce, bloody, imperfect, and life-giving, a choice we make over and over again. If love is sweet labor, love can be taught, modeled, and practiced. This labor engages all of our emotions. Joy is the gift of love. Grief is the price of love. Anger is the force that protests that which is loved. And when we think we have reached our limit, wonder is the act that returns us to love." Love can be taught, modeled, and practiced. Well, Jesus taught and modeled love through his sustained focus on the poor, the oppressed, the foreigner, the widow, and orphan. For he didn't just lay down his life at the end of his life. He laid down his time and his talents again and again in order to heal, to feed, to defend those in need. And we also see this revolutionary love modeled today. It's Miss Lupe making 176 phone calls during the winter storm to Santa Rita residents and volunteers in order to coordinate the delivery of blankets, food, and water. It's Jody, one of the residents at our nonprofit partner foundation communities, who is always willing to accompany a neighbor to the grocery store who might be scared to shop alone. It's you showing up for your most caustic, cantankerous, COVID-denying relative. It's the meals you make them. It's your body sitting next to them. It's Emmabet, a member of the Help One Now Family Empowerment Program in Ethiopia. When Emmabet's husband got sick and could no longer work, she started her own business and eventually employed her husband and others in the community. But she didn't stop when she could feed her own family. She took in 4 more children who were living on the street. She got them enrolled in school and paid their fees. Then she uncovered why they were living on the streets, learned their stories, contacted their parents, and is now working to reunify these kids with their families. The help she received, she reinvested in her community. You know what this love is. You've felt it. You've received it and you've given it. Your body has shown up for another body. Sometimes it's loud and sometimes it's invisible. Sometimes it's for strangers, and sometimes the obnoxious person in the next room. Sometimes it is through an organization, sometimes through a relationship. It's all love in action. It's all what we were created for. Let's keep reading. This is how we know that we belong to the truth and how we set our hearts at rest in his presence. If our hearts condemn us, we know that God is greater than our hearts, and he knows everything. Dear friends, if our hearts do not condemn us, we have confidence before God and receive from him anything we ask because we keep his commands and do what pleases him. To live condemned by your heart is a terrible thing. I wonder if our hearts condemn us when we are living in word but not action, when we are behaving like not enough people, when the heart knows that we have enough plus leftovers. Why does this happen? Why do we fall out of alignment? There's a few reasons that I revert to words and speech instead of truth and action, and maybe you can relate to some of these. Fear. I fear doing good badly. I fear perpetuating a white savior complex that elevates my status and my understanding rather than the dignity and wisdom of the less privileged person. And I fear what I will lose. Something deep within me fears what it will mean to deconstruct the system that prioritizes whiteness. Or sometimes it's doubt that keeps me reliant on words and speech. I doubt my small contribution will make a difference or have a lasting impact. Sometimes I doubt it will be stewarded well. And often when I face the brokenness of our systems, I am overwhelmed with despair. Bring a meal to one person experiencing homelessness in our city, and you can't help but notice the 19 other tents nearby. Achieve a sliver of accountability in the Derek Chauvin trial, and be saddened at the surprise of it. Mourn for all the black families who never saw the bare minimum verdict for their beloved. Lament how far we have to go. Refugees trying to fit through the eye of a needle to be welcome here. Global hunger on the rise. The demonization of trans youth. The morning's headlines will make you wish you hadn't gotten up. To be honest, sometimes when I'm trying to step in God's presence in solidarity with the suffering, I'm just overwhelmed by his absence. We won't conquer fear, doubt, and despair by ignoring them. And confronting them can actually deepen and maybe reimagine our work. Because doing good well does matter. Caution may yield constructive discernment about how best to engage. Healthy skepticism can lead to a more sustainable impact. Despair is sacred and called for. We can welcome these feelings in our body, but our hearts condemn us when we allow them to paralyze us. Talking through how best to go about the work shouldn't talk us out of the work. As Elizabeth Gilbert says, fear, doubt, and despair can come along for the ride, and they can even have a voice, but they don't get to drive. The final verse is before us today, and this is his command, to believe in the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and to love one another as he commanded us. The one who keeps God's commands lives in him, and he in them. And this is how we know that he lives in us. We know it by the Spirit he gave us. We hear in this an echo of John's gospel and the beautiful image of the vine and the branches. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. We'll talk more about that next week. Because the truth is, we don't need to do good and serve the poor and dismantle systems of oppression to earn God's favor. We do these things because having God's favor, we are wired to protect and cherish the face of God in all people. The more we root ourselves in enoughness, the more we have to give away. You know, we keep learning about the science of generosity, or really just sharing. Doing good decreases stress. Empathy improves immunity. Kindness produces feelings of gratitude and promotes mental health. When we experience compassion, our autonomic nervous system that regulates our heart rate goes down, preparing us not to fight or flee, but to approach and soothe. And there is even a neural link between generosity and happiness. Might these be indicators of Christ abiding in us? Are these biological benefits a sign that living generously is acting in alignment with how we were created? If our body flourishes when it is poured out for others, then perhaps we've discovered what it was designed for. You know, we may first experience generosity as a sporadic instinct, and maybe then we hope it will become a practice. But as any athlete will tell you, you actually cultivate the practice, and then it becomes a true impulse, or even a reflex. Like, I didn't improvise my center of the lane floater shot. My dad and I drilled it again and again, and eventually it became part of my game. It's what helped us beat Naperville Central. So how can we be intentional about our practice? The world is opening back up, and we're finally starting to do something that we haven't done for a year. Plan. We're trying to hold on to what we learned in the Great Pause, and we talk about not going back to normal, about building something better. So what are we planning to do with what has been revealed about our relationship to one another? About inequity, global poverty, and the racial injustice crushing the bodies of our brothers and sisters? Will we expand our capacity to respond in love? We each fall somewhere along a continuum in our personal generosity journey, and there are a couple of transformational models for giving and service that have been really stretching for me, so I've adapted my own version for our purposes here. Now, I want to be clear, this is not a ladder to climb or a list to check off. Let me say that again for the Enneagram 3s. This cycle isn't necessarily linear. In different seasons of our lives, we will move in and out of these stages. And I believe God celebrates every single time we choose to love through action, no matter how small. But I offer this as a gentle framework for identifying where you are now and envisioning how you might continue to grow in this arena. Of course, our primary resources are time, money, and talent. Some of us also have a space, a network, a platform, or other resources too. So I use the word give in the broadest sense to include all forms of giving. Most of us begin as reactive givers. When a need arises or a news headline grabs you, you find yourself asking, do I have enough extra time, money, talent to give right now? These are the Kickstarters and the meal cookers. This is giving money to the man at the stoplight, calling senators in the wake of another tragedy, or watching your neighbor's kids last minute. A beautiful thing about this kind of response is that it can be highly emotional, connecting us to our deepest compassionate instincts. But operating in this stage for a long time can be exhausting. Proactive generosity can help avoid burnout. So eventually we might become committed givers. Maybe you volunteer regularly or support a nonprofit with a monthly contribution. Maybe you've made an ongoing commitment to support a relative or friend in need. You're asking, how can I plan so that I can engage or contribute regularly? In this stage, you may start to narrow your focus to a particular passion area or impacted group. This might require more learning, and you may find yourself more invested in tracking your impact as you stay with a project or person over time. Then there are purposeful givers, and this is a critical stage in which you don't focus only on what you get to give, but you start to examine what you are keeping and why. You ask, where can I scale back in order to prioritize my giving? This might look like downsizing or simplifying in order to free up more capacity, more resources to share. You begin to give to God or to those who are suffering off the top of what you have, rather than out of what's left over. And finally, I'm sure we all know some truly open-handed givers. These people have made a lifetime commitment of radical generosity. And there are folks like this in our community who I'm learning a ton from. In this stage, they're asking, how can my biggest decisions help leverage my life for the love of brothers and sisters in need, which is, of course, the love of Christ. This posture shapes your biggest choices and ambitions about where and how you live, when you work and what time you give away, how you build and use your platform, what you save for, and what you give back to God. Open-handed givers know themselves and their body's capacity for reacting wholeheartedly to an urgent need, and thus the cycle continues. Now, no matter where we're at on this spectrum, we must stay attuned to the feedback our bodies give us. We need to learn how to restore our strength and root our identity in who we are, not what we do. Should we find ourselves overtaken by bitterness, resentment, and duty rather than experiencing the joy of love, we ought to pay attention and make adjustments. Living from the heart never means erasing yourself. I wonder, can you identify and celebrate wherever you might be on this journey? As you look ahead to the next stage of your growth, it might help to reflect with someone who knows you well. Where was I a year ago? Where does our family want to go next? What are we learning in our current approach to generosity? Because the miracle of it all is that as we release what we have for others, we too transform. As we lay down our bodies for bodies in need, we experience new life together. Oh, church, may we embody what we say we believe. Instead of closing in prayer, as the band begins this next song, I want to invite you to tune into your body and let the prayer come from within. So right now, right where you are, come into awareness of the sensations you feel. Drop out of your minds, wherever you're sitting, on a chair, on a couch, alone, next to a stranger, next to someone you love, next to your dog. Come out of your minds and into your bones. Breathe deeply. And over the next minute, while the band plays, notice and welcome whatever is rising up within you. Resistance, excitement, nerves, joy. Listen for the call from deep within. What is God's prayer from your heart in this moment? Do our bodies already know who or where or what our next step might be? Take this next minute to listen before we worship together.
To the raging sea, in the silence
covers me. My heart is yours completely. My heart is yours only. You love with no reservation. You're not
have my heart.
Sing that to him.
Oh, oh, you can have my heart. You can have my heart.
I wish you could see the confused bodies in the room right now. Nobody knows what to do, whether to jump up and sing and shout or sit there because you're at some taping of a live stream. Can we just name that it's super confusing for bodies right now? Isn't it confusing? We don't know what to do. I'm just going to give you a little tip, though. This is from a bass player. When you see an upright bass player singing, you need to be on your feet, shaking your body or something. You guys realize how rare this is? Billy, it's Billy's first time with us. How many upright bass players, Billy, do you know that can sing at the same time?
I probably can count them on one hand.
Yes, you could count them on one hand, yeah. And that's not because he's got a lot of fingers. Although it sounds like it. Anyway, y'all, it's so good to be here. Sam, what a great job. I want you to hear from us, from me, that we are, no pun intended, or perhaps intended, we are heart attack serious about what it means to be an embodied people of faith. So here's the secret sauce that no one taught me as a younger person, that our faith is actually a deeply embodied thing. So as we're reading the scriptures as a guild and as we're working through these passages, I have to admit, I've never paid much attention to the post-resurrection stories, but these are body tales, y'all. These are body snatchers and weird bodies that eat, and this is doubt at the heart level, which is not the same as here. Like, we're serious about this, and it's emerging as we go. But thank you, Sam, for giving yourself to that. As it turns out, we were a missional church long before we were the church we are today. Our first contribution may have been around the idea of doing mission well, right? Well, where do you think mission springs from, guys? It springs from the heart. It springs from bodies in action and bodies in the world. And so we're serious about this. And so today was a beautiful expression of that. If it's reaching you where you're at and you're starting to think of yourself differently in the world you inhabit, that's the point. That's more discipleship than it is actually deconstruction. So don't let the people who condemn that journey tell you you've lost your way, guys. This is what discipleship was always going to look like. That's why he circled back and spent 40 days exploring this embodiment with us. And so thank you, Sam. Thank you for that. We're going to touch on another passage in John a week from today as we move ourselves into May. But before we go, these words as a benediction, and speaking of embodiment, another little group of people who work behind the scenes here are our poets. And some of our poets who write these benedictions are professors, some are romance novel writers, some are therapists, some are acting people with theater degrees, some are currently studying creative writing. We've got a fantastic group of folks who pore over these passages and these words every week. And so these words from David Nix today as we go our way. Now that normal lies within our grasp, is normal any longer sufficient? Will we return to looking away from the outstretched hand, from the booted neck, from the crying eye? Will we cede that ground to another person, a different time, or a later cause? Or shall we strive to become more in the here and now? We hold to the promise of resurrection, we do, to the promise of what comes next. We idealize it, we yearn for it, but great irony of following Jesus is this: it takes far more courage to lay down our lives than to rise from the dead. So be courageous, church. Be heaven on earth right now. Don't look away. Don't abandon the field. And imagine, if you will, the unlimited possibilities of a new normal. Be blessed, and we'll see you back here.